it's kind of like they're a bit precarious. They're people who like to be miserable. And that's probably a bit harsh, but they're very sensitive to, dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And it's so powerful to identify, because if I've got a green lighter, I just enjoy it. If
Yeah.
I've got an amber lighter, I just keep a close eye on all the details, dot the I's, cross the T's. And with the red lighters, the key with red light guests is to adjust the listing so they don't show up in the first place.
All right. So Dunstan, tell me who you are.
Well, I'm an Airbnb host, an entrepreneur, and I have a little twist because I host on boats in the beautiful city of Bath in the southwest of England. And I am, as we speak, pivoting into helping other people who want to either get started with hosting or become better hosts. And that's really exciting. So that's where I'm at right now.
Okay. Very cool. So I find this angle of Airbnb pretty fascinating. Uh, Hosting boats and boat parties. How many boats do you have? Are they small boats, big boats? I don't really know much about this world.
Yeah, it's a whole nother world, the boating world. I have currently got 3 listings,
Okay.
and that's enough. 2 of them are what are called wide beams. So it's based on an old barge type working boat. They don't go
Hmm.
to sea. They're a steel hull, and it's like a flat inside. And then I also have a smaller boat that's my fun camping boat.
Yeah.
So, but the main ones are the wide beams.
And so you're able to basically live full time off Airbnb boat rentals.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm very grateful to Airbnb for giving me that opportunity, and we've run with it. So yeah, it's been good.
What so tell me about Bath. For the people that don't know that area. It's beautiful.
It is an old Roman city. Even before the Romans, people came to enjoy the geothermal springs, the hot water,
Hmm.
and it's got some beautiful architecture. It's a small, friendly city with everything you need, close to the countryside. So it's a great destination for people visiting England to come check out.
What's it what are the challenges of hosting, say, a boat versus just a traditional like condo?
Right, that's a great question. Thank you. Yeah. It's really, you have like a number of extra things to consider. So the day-to-day things is I have to make sure my guests have enough water. So the water tank has to be filled up, and
Mhm.
that's like a 3-hour round trip. I have to deal with the black water from the
Yeah.
toilet, make sure the toilets are empty, and then deal with that. I have to stock up with firewood and coal, and then we have to manage the batteries to make sure that the batteries are getting charged up for the electricity on board.
Now, are these people allowed to drive the boat up and down the
Mm-mm.
channel themselves, or how do you
Mm-mm.
regulate that?
No, we're a static mooring, so they just stay in the same spot, and it
Okay.
suits most people really well. They're 1 or 2
Yeah.
nighters. Hmm.
Okay. What what got you started in this versus just the traditional Airbnb arbitrage?
It was actually I was in a share house in Bristol. I'd just come back to England from living overseas,
Yeah.
and I ended up, I was hosting. I didn't have any capital or resources, and I was just hosting in the share house. And then my housemates all said, "Oh no, we don't want you hosting anymore." And I said, "Right, I'm going to go live on a boat." And then I managed to find a boat to rent, and the owner was cool. And I just started from there, and we built. Um, so yeah, it was just the desire for freedom, really. I love that feeling of, being somewhat untethered from bills and council taxes, and you're a little bit of a pirate when you're on a boat. So that's fun.
So, for the people that don't know Dunstan, how many countries have you visited?
Goodness gracious, I've not even counted, but I did live in Australia for 10 years. I raced Ironman in Hawaii, in New Zealand, been to Japan, raced Ironman in Brazil, back in the day doing the triathlon, Europe. Um, yeah, my grandfather was born in Argentina. My father was born in Argentina, so we got a bit of a connection over there.
Yeah, you're an honest to goodness world traveler. Like your stories are crazy. So, competing in Ironman, that's a certain kind of person. I don't think people really understand the kind of mental fortitude and uh, ability to withstand just constant shit, pain, if that makes sense. What got you into Ironmans?
I lived in England, and when I was a kid, there was a guy from the running shop, and he did Ironman. And in England, if you have someone who's an Olympian, it's like, oh my God, I know someone who's really good at sport. And most people
Mhm.
aren't that into it. I went to Australia, ended up living there 10 years, and the scene is amazing for triathlon. So
Oh, I
I'd
bet.
qualified to, yeah, yeah, it's amazing. Everyone's up at 5 in the morning on the bike training.
Well, and
Uh,
that kind of scenery, I bet it's a lot easier than
the
a lot
weather
of places.
helps.
Yeah.
It sure does.
Did any of that Iron Man type mentality help you when you started your Airbnb business?
I've not made the connection, but I definitely
Mm,
feel that thing of like, everywhere in an Ironman race, you're gonna have a flat patch. And it's just all you can do to just keep going in that flat patch. And when you've done 3 turnarounds on boats in one day and the guests are late and then something's broken on the boat and it's like just got to keep going and keep going and keep going till it's all done.
yeah.
So yeah, I guess that's a connection.
Well, maybe you don't realize how much work you're actually doing. It just seems normal.
When I'm trying to get someone else to do it, I do realize.
Yeah. See, that's where you realize it. So you're transitioning to online coaching. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So, having faced all the extra challenges on the boats, including flooding and various things, it's kind of like hosting in a house is on easy mode for me. And I've dealt with all these challenges, and I've been a coach and a teacher before, and I have a passion for sharing that with other people. And the thing with hosting is it's a gateway entrepreneur situation where,
Yeah.
people who maybe wouldn't think, oh, I'm an entrepreneur, they're like, oh, well, I want to host, I've got a spare room. But they obviously are less experienced in business, less experienced in customer service. And there's so many little things you can do to just give a much better experience to your guests, but also keep your own energy and integrity and look after yourself as well as a host.
What do you mean by that? Keep your energy and integrity.
So most hosts either fall into one category or the other. They're either very cold and informal and very businesslike, and it's a bit clinical, or they're very friendly and very warm and they overgive, they overstretch. They're always trying to give more and more and more. They don't charge for any of the extras. And then they might get a guest who's not a good fit, or it's a bad vibe. And then they take it personally and they feel terrible afterwards.
Mm.
Whereas you have to take the rough with the smooth, and just not take it personally, and always try to do your best for a wide range of different guests who have different needs and personality types.
How do you filter for bad guests or good guests?
Yeah, it's such a good question. We've been through waves. It's a constant iterative process of tweaking the listing, because
Mm.
obviously once you've got the booking, you're stuck with that person. And it's like, it's like going on a bad date, and you know it's not going to be great, but you sort of try and make the best of it you can.
Yeah.
Whereas much better to filter them beforehand, just being super honest on the listing, especially with a boat that's basic and doesn't have a shower. And one thing I
Okay.
do is, once they've booked, I send them an automatic message saying, look, you do realize, don't you, this boat doesn't have a shower. It's a basic boat. And just to make sure, because people don't read the listing. So
That's a smart move. It's like
just filtering
insurance a
that
little bit.
out.
You were telling me about over giving. That reminded me a little bit when I was a coach. I found that early on, it's really easy to kind of be a cheerleader, so to speak, and to take an unmotivated person and give them a lot of rah rah, you can do it, let's go. A lot of screaming, jumping, etc. But it really drains you at the end of the day. And there's a real fine line between being stern and but also preserving your own energy, so to speak. You know,
What sport were you coaching in?
I coach Muay Thai and mixed martial arts.
Nice.
I did that, supported myself for several years doing that as I transitioned from a couple different industries into other ones.
Well, I certainly enjoyed sparring with you when we got the chance to do that. So you
Yeah.
obviously have a depth of experience in many different fighting aspects. So
Oh,
I'm
it's
sure we'll
fun.
touch on that later.
They're fun little skills to build.
Hmm.
I was actually pretty impressed with how in shape you were. So how old are you again?
I'm 49, just turned 49.
Yeah. So we actually talked with Ian the other day. And we were talking about his workouts. But for anybody that knows Sultan of Strong, Ian, he his workouts are brutal. And Dunstan actually smoked me on a couple. So for your Dunstan is incredibly athletic for his age. The
Had a
Ironman
tip.
stuff pays off.
Yeah, someone said get fit. So I went through a couple of decades there where I did very little apart from a little bit of kite surfing. I was focused in other areas.
Really?
So my sort of peak triathlon was around about 29.
Okay.
So it was literally 2 decades, and fitter than I've been in a long time. And you know how it is, that just has that knock-on effect into other things. And
Mm,
sometimes people say, oh, why do you spend all that time training? You're already really fit. You should be focused on your entrepreneurial stuff because, obviously that's, I'd say my fitness is stronger than my entrepreneurial set right now. But being fit, doing the training energizes me. I feed on that energy and that fuels everything else that I have to do. So, yeah. That's a real thing, and I think also we could just double back a moment, if you like, to that question about the question about over delivering. I
mm,
find that my talent is I can really perceive very accurately where my guests are at, and the moment that the energy in the conversation drops is my cue to leave. It could be that they've got what they need, they want to be left alone, or it could be they just want to have a kind of just talk and chat because they just want to chat and they like being around me. But it just helps to feel, I'm busy and I have a really strong sense of value. So if there's high value there and I'm giving high value, they want to know more about boat life, I'll give that extra value. But then I'm like, okay, I got to go do something else, and they respect that. So it's yeah, I don't want to get stuck in those sort of situations where we're just talking about nothing.
yeah.
Um,
Well, so do you find that by giving this extra service, you can charge more per night? Yeah. Is there
yeah,
much competition in where you are for boat rentals?
very much so. Yeah,
Okay.
Bath, actually, interesting fact, Bath is sort of built in a valley, so there's not any urban sprawl. So on a busy weekend, Bath literally fills up. So on a Saturday night, everywhere is full. So
Oh,
there is a lot of competition, but most of the places are kind of pretty standard, like four-poster bed, looking really fancy, and it's just same. Whereas the boat's obviously very different. So that makes up for all the extra work. So the question was, do I get it? What's the business return of the extra value that I give? So quite a few of my guests are interested to live on a boat, and they ask me all sorts of things about that. And I've
mm,
helped guests to find boats in the past, but one of the tricks I use, it's a fantastic trick for anyone that has, in Fight Club, where Tyler Durden says that you have single serving friends on a
yes.
flight, like a
Hmm.
little catch up, and it's a fantastic exercise. Hosting is a fantastic exercise. Like I've had
Mm,
1,000 guests, over 1,000 different interactions, and
wow.
it's all about how can I establish really good communication so that they'll ask me for what they need, they'll take good care of the boat, happy guest, happy host, and we're winning. And that gets reflected in the reviews. One trick that I do is just to start communicating with them as soon as they've booked. I start to, drip feed them information. So rather than just having from check in to check out to get everything right, by the time they've arrived, they feel like friends already because we've helped them with the
Mm,
parking, we've helped them
I love
find the
that.
boat, we know a bit about what they're doing, and um, yeah, it's just the dialogue. So we open that window of, here's your opportunity to do your best. We open out that window, and that's a fantastic way to do Airbnb better. And I'm sure other service industries can do that. And then we get the tail end as well, because then after they've left, then it's a case of, here's my Instagram, you can stay in touch. If you want to come back, we'll give you a discount if you contact me. So it's nice to extend the life cycle of the interaction and the customer, the guest.
That's brilliant. Are most of your guests within the UK, or do you find a lot of international travelers?
It depends on the season. So I get Americans, Canadians, Australians, New Zealand, Europeans in the summer very much, and school holidays. So during the school holidays, there's a bit more different locations, and there's quite a lot of Americans
Mm,
dotted around the place. And yeah, I'd say probably 60-70% English people. When we had the crazy times, it was 100% English people, like 2021, 2022.
oh yeah,
As
during
soon as
COVID.
the gates opened, there was that latent demand to travel. So I
Yeah.
think it was August 22 was a monster month.
Do you ever find yourself overbooked to the point where you maybe
I
consider
fill
getting
up.
another boat or?
Yeah, I mean that was originally how I scaled, was by adding extra boats.
Mhm.
But I don't want to get any more boats because it's a
Yeah.
linear growth process. And the beautiful thing about, it's someone put it really clearly to me on a call the other day, is like leverage. So it's like, if I pull this lever, if I get one more boat, the other end moves 10, an extra 30%. But if I can have a lever that's 100 times as long, I can work this much harder. I can create content, and I can, serve a lot more people. And that's where I can have exponential growth. And it also frees me up location wise, because
Oh,
Airbnb
it's
is
brilliant.
obviously international.
I
So
noticed.
yeah, that geographical freedom is huge, to
Yeah.
be able to do
Well, it's
that.
a fun project to be able to push out information and helpful stuff that actually helps people, and be compensated well for it, potentially.
100%.
You
Yeah,
know.
100%. And having
So
the key thing for me is just having a really good team of people helping me with that, because
yes, anything is
I'm not
possible with the right team. Corbin is
correct.
such a good dude. He is essential to this project. It sucks that he couldn't be here today, but um, I couldn't do
I
this
look
without
forward to
him.
meeting him.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure he'll be around again. What So when you were talking about single serving friends, there's a similar, I guess, psyche to coaching. Everyone needs to be coached a little different, and everyone learns a little different, and everyone gravitates towards certain move sets early on. How do you coach these baby entrepreneurs with your material in your courses?
That's a great question. That's a really great question. A lot of the stuff that I've developed over the time is just sort of obvious. So when I have to train another staff member,
Mhm.
or when I have to teach it, it forces me to formulate it and to codify what I'm actually doing. So I have a vast variety of different systems that I use to make sure things work. So one example, which links back to something earlier, is the traffic light system. So I have green light guests, ambers, and reds. And my green lights are the guests that I just love to host. For
Mhm.
them, they just love to be on the boat, and everything is just a joy and it's easy. The amber light guests are the guests that if I get everything right, they'll be happy. As a super host, it's all about getting a 5-star review. If you and you don't want to think about, oh, I need to get 80% 5-star reviews. You want
Yeah.
every single review to be a 5-star.
Well, and for anybody
And
listening, only 5 stars for Proper Thieves. Otherwise, it's bad for you. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
give these I give these thieves a
5-star
5-star for
podcast.
reals.
That's
So yeah, the ambers, if I get it right, they're going to be happy. And then the reds are, it's kind of like they're a bit precarious. They're people who like to be miserable, and that's probably a bit harsh, but they're very sensitive to dotting the i's and crossing the t's, and it's so powerful to identify, because if I've got a green lighter, I just enjoy it. If
Yeah.
I've got an amber lighter, I just keep a close eye on all the details, dot the i's, cross the t's. And with the red lighters, the key with red light guests is to adjust the listing so they don't show up in the first place. And
Oh,
that's an iterative process.
interesting.
But then if they do show up, I have a few little tricks that I can pull out of my repertoire to make them happy. And then it becomes like a game of chess. You know how some people just want to be unhappy, or they're always looking for what's not right.
Yeah.
So I know all the moves they're going to play. And if I get a new one, I'm like, cool, I've never experienced this before. They're unhappy about this thing. But I'm literally really only talking about 1 in 100 of my guests, because the energy of my listings, the energy of the photos, the energy of the reviews
Mm.
attracts the right kind of people.
How do you structure your photographs, or how do you go about
Um,
choosing them?
yeah, you're supposed to rotate. If you rotate the first photo, then that can be good for the optimization. There's some little ninja tricks with that. The first 5 photos are the ones that people are going to see, because most people, 80% of guests aren't going to flick through all the way to the end. There are some people who want to see the kitchen and the bathroom and see that they're clean. And the aim is, in the first 5 photos, we're telling a mini story of the space. So it's like, here's you in the space, and you want the guest to feel as if they're there. So little things like, if there's a cup of, the stuff to make your tea and coffee. They can see you. You want the guest to be able to imagine themselves in that position in the photo. You don't want to have someone else in the photo. It's got to be an inviting space where they look at it and they go, "Oh, I could see myself sitting there playing backgammon," or "Oh, I could see myself sitting on the balcony on the back of the boat having a glass of wine, watching the paddleboarders go past in the summer."
That's brilliant. So a lot of people probably put not even 10% thought into their photos when they're booking.
It's the biggest thing, and getting good quality photos is game changing.
Do you track
Yeah,
your own
it's
analytics and clicks and views and conversion rate, or do you have a team member for doing that?
the
How do you go about
Airbnb
doing that?
analytics are not great, so it's
Mhm.
definitely an area to look at. I haven't yet worked out how to. It's something on my list of things to do, is to get deeper into the analytics and get more data. But even simple things like tracking sales, the weekly sales, how many what I'm doing in sales per week, and the actual amount of sales for each of the coming weeks. And there's like a trend where, half term people aren't booking so much because they're traveling, and then everyone books for the next thing. There's always the next holiday, and the bookings seem to come through in waves, which is very interesting just to see how people
Hmm.
often have that group think. They all kind of behave the same
Migrate at the
way.
same time.
Correct.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I want to go back to something you said just a second ago. You said you have a couple tricks for the red light guess. What are those?
Well, they're kind of secret. That's what the
Ha,
people who sign up for my paid courses get
got it.
to learn about. But
What is your course website?
so I'm at superhostacademy.org,
Hmm.
and that's where my customers who are interested in upping their game with hosting or getting started can download my ebook, and then they can receive regular updates from me. So superhostacademy.org.
Oh yeah, definitely go there. Sign up, get your email in. Um,
I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it? Like back in the day, I had this thing about, in the 80s in England, we had the yuppies who were go getters, go get. And there's also, which is very important, but there's also go giver. So
mm,
the whole point of having a business like this means that you can be in service to people. And even if, 90% of the people that pay attention to me never buy anything, they're paying with their attention. And then the algorithm shows my stuff to more people.
well, some
So
of people's most prized memories are vacations they've taken, whether it be with their family or their wife or girlfriend or brother. But to provide that is actually a pretty cool thing. And then to be able to exponentially expand on how many other people can provide these experiences is really cool. I think vacationing and holidays, as you guys call it over there, is really part of the human experience. It gives the carrot on the end of the stick for sometimes the drudgery of working the less than awesome jobs that people have. You know, well, I work hard for 2 months, and then I'm going to take this trip to Bath,
right,
and then
right.
you know,
And I guess the other thing I hadn't realized until you mentioned that is I get to see people when they're in the 10% of their life that's the most fun, right?
yes,
Whereas if you
yeah,
work in an office, you've got to go through all the stuff that,
that's the
the
drudgery.
heaviness. I
Yeah,
get to see
there's a
people when,
people are in a different wavelength when they're on vacation. They're in vacation mode, and they're happy, and they're conversational, and everything's good. It is a fun time to be around people in general.
I think I
What
have a twisted view of the world because I get to see that. So then I come across people who are just doing the regular life and I'm like, why is that guy so grumpy? When it's just normal. So yeah.
For a lot of people, it is.
Uh,
And so you're basically creating your own dream life, as you go. And especially your age, I think, and not to sound rude, but people are less likely to try something new the older they get. I think it's easy for a guy when he's 19 or 20 to make a radical career change, but a guy when he's 39 or 40 or 49 or 50 is much different. It's not necessarily a change, but it's trying something new, putting yourself out there, branding yourself, marketing. It's a big step, and you tackle this task as if it's no big deal, as if it's just the next thing on your to-do list for the day. Um, where do you get this confidence in general
hmm,
to
that's a
to
great
to
question.
do that at such a unique time in your life?
That's a really good question. And it's hard to answer because if it's just normal for me, the way I'm living at the moment is just like, right, what's the next thing? I guess the first thing I'd say is I have never sought the comfortable life. I've never wanted to be comfortable. I've always wanted to do new things that are interesting. And, I love hosting, and I can do it with my hands behind my back and my eyes closed. So I need a new challenge. The other thing I'll say is that it's been 10 years where I've been craving to express the side of myself that's a teacher, that likes to coach people. And, let's face it, there's no one part of being an Airbnb host that's actually really that hard. It's not rocket science. There's loads of moving parts and attention to detail, but there's nothing in there that you couldn't teach anybody to do if they really wanted to do. So, whereas actually changing people's lives, actually having people, it's game changing. Say, one of my guests is an artist, and she just moved back from Morocco. She has Moroccan roots, and she got a flat, and she started hosting, and she's now got long-term bookings, and she can go travel. She can do her art. She has time. And that was my first aim, was to claim back my time and just be able to live for free by sharing my space.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting. She's hit her first roadblock, which is, she's had some bad reviews, even though she really cares. And, so that's another little tipping point of, oh, it was going really well, but then this bad thing happened. And a lot of hosts quit. They say a lot of businesses fail after 1 year.
Yes.
A lot of hosts give up at that point because they don't know how to overcome that particular hurdle, that particular challenge. And so that's a really beautiful area to help people with, is saying, look, it's working so well. You just need to make these little tweaks and be more professional, and you can keep going, and you can go to the next level.
Having that mentor that you can call goes a long way, especially if it's in your specific field that you're trying to do.
I have friends who host, and they'll sometimes say, "Oh, I've got this problem with this guest. How does it work with Airbnb?" And it's like knowing how the Airbnb systems work and what the policies are. So, for example, they have a policy where if a guest cancels, I obviously have a strict policy. So if it's within 2 weeks, I get a full payout minus the cleaning fee. Now, Airbnb say that I can cancel with any guest where I feel uncomfortable. However, I've discovered the deeper part of that, which is if I'm not happy with a guest and I cancel, then I lose my payout, and that's a loss of earnings. However, if the guest, as occasionally happens, books for 2 people and turns up with 4 people, I can just cancel that with no penalty whatsoever. And, they've obviously not done the right thing. So I'd obviously try and be reasonable and find a solution, but it's just it's like knowing the law. It's like knowing the parameters that you can work with. And like you say, having someone that you can call up and say, well, what should I do in this situation? The main thing is, if something's gone wrong, what do I need to do to put it right? How can I make this guest happy? And then how can I change my systems to avoid that situation happening again?
You're trying to help these future entrepreneurs get their time back. What have you done with your time since doing this? Like, how do you spend your free time now that you have geographical freedom and time on your hands?
Well, I'm working on the geographical freedom, but the extra time, my first aim was just to have that time, but now I want to fill it with doing more, being in more service. So I was filling it with more boats, but now I've got a bit of a team coming together. So now I'm filling it with, this is exciting. This is making content. And there was almost, like I mentioned, the latent demand to go on holiday when everyone had been locked in their houses. That's a bit how my creative spirit is, because I've been craving to do this stuff and waiting for everything to line up. And here we are. So this is beautiful.
Yeah. So would you consider this a hobby that you're delving into, or
I have
what?
no idea. I used to be allergic to the idea of business because it sort of says busyness, and I didn't want to be busy. But the thing is, like, it's that sweet spot. I'm not the first person to say it, but it's that sweet spot of being, because I like to be super efficient, and I get energized by being efficient and organized. But it's kind of like the sweet spot of being efficient, but also putting in the effort. So it's being effective and doing more, grinding, working hard. But it's not working hard For anyone that's starting out with hosting, everyone has a different hosting journey, your journey through being a host. And when I first started, we haven't mentioned this yet, but when I first started, I had nothing. I had a boat that I bought for £7,000 and I rented it out and I went camping and I was getting paid, £70 a night to go camping. And then I decided if I got a bivy bag, it was quicker. And so I started with nothing. So I've gone through all the different phases to now having a fleet of 3 boats and, doing really well. So there's different challenges at each of those different phases. And like we said, it's a gateway for an entrepreneur. And the beautiful thing is, if someone's starting their journey as an entrepreneur, it's so beautiful to help someone to take their first steps. And actually build something that's in service to people. It's an industry that's not going away. There's always going to be hosting, and Airbnb's a great platform for empowering micro entrepreneurs.
If I want to get started in this, could I? Do you teach how to host just homes and apartments to know the bread and butter?
100%. 100%. Yeah. The most important thing when you're starting is to use my affiliate link because I get a good kickback.
Okay.
But yeah,
Corbin,
it's
affiliate link.
I'll send it through.
Yeah.
They're actually really generous. If you're a super host and you refer someone and they host their first guest, you get paid like about £500, so maybe $600 or $700. So it's very generous.
Wow, that's great.
Everyone has their own approach. There's some people who like to get everything perfect before they start, and I'm not like that at all. Every single boat I've ever hosted on, I'm like, right, let's get our first guests, let's discount it, let's start, and then let's adjust it as it goes along. Begin, and then you can steer. Once the ship is in movement, once the ship is moving forward, it's a perfect boat analogy. If you go like this on the rudder of a boat, it doesn't do anything. But if the ship is moving forward, you move the tiller and you can adjust the course of the boat. So get started, I actually started out hosting in a friend's flat for New Year's Eve in Sydney. So I saw the opportunity because in Sydney, it gets super busy. Everybody goes out of town who's local. And then the tourists and the visitors want to be in town for the fireworks. So perfect little bit of arbitrage there to set that up.
How did you set that up? Through your friend's apartment?
I had a girlfriend who had a flat, and I persuaded her to host. And it was a tiny little 1-bedroom flat. We had 4 Germans who were coming to stay, and they persuaded us to have 4 rather than 2. And but when we came back, the neighbors said there were about 15 people in there. So
oh my God,
all of our worst fears came true. So my friend was horrified about the whole situation, but we managed to make it right. Airbnb
was the apartment
paid.
trashed?
It was just a bit dirty, and it wasn't trashed, but it wasn't great. But we charged him a load of extra cleaning. And that's another thing, any problem that you have, there's normally an amount of money that will make it worth dealing with that problem. So my friend was like, oh, now I've got to do all this cleaning. I said, don't worry about it. How much do you want to get paid per hour for the extra cleaning? Let's charge these Germans the fee. They can split it amongst their 16 people, and it'll be like €30 each. And you can get paid €30 an hour to $50 an hour for cleaning or whatever it was.
Yeah. That is a great thing about Airbnb and these kind of hosting platforms is they provide us somewhat of an insurance, and
100%.
collections is so much more impersonal that way.
100%. Yeah, I mean, they have to look after that. They're trying to make everybody happy, and they have to look after their hosts, because if something really bad happens, it's terrible for their PR. So it's really in their interest to make sure that. And here's another little interesting thing. If there's ever a dispute with a guest, or the guest is saying, no, I don't want to pay that, but they've agreed to pay it. Not many people realize this, but Airbnb will often step in and cover the difference to keep everybody happy.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really important to know when to stand your ground. There's a time to give more, and there's also a time where you say, okay, that's enough. I'm going to stand my ground here. And, you need to pay extra for that, or you need to pay me for the, like if someone wants to bring a dog, I charge them for an extra person.
Yeah, smart.
And there's lots of little extras like that you can charge for, like parking, and there's so many little optional extras, and compared to what someone would pay, there's lots of little, like, hotels have their mini bars. Also, you know, learning where I can send my guests. I have a standard message that lists 5 to 7 different places they can go to eat. And
Mm.
I know all those restaurants personally. So I'm like, oh, yeah, go and see Carl at the Herd for a steak. Or if you're vegetarian, go to this vegetarian Indian curry house.
You're
And
like a concierge.
yeah, they feel they have a personal experience. And,
Mhm.
I say, here's a beautiful walk you can go on, the things that I enjoy. So it's more than just accommodation.
Oh, that's brilliant. What so we were talking about confidence, and you had told me before we started recording about the passing of your father was kind of a big
Hmm.
moment for you, but that helped you grow as a man. Can you tell me that story?
Yeah. Yeah, I am so blessed that I was really at peace with my father several years before he passed. There was some stuff that went on between us, nothing of any, yeah, nothing bad, but there was just that sort of a bit of, wishing he'd been more of a man, or, he used to
Mm.
get angry with me when I was a little kid, and we just cleared all of it. And so when he passed, a lot of people, I say, oh, my father passed last year, and they're like, oh my God, that's so sad. But the thing was with my father, he is an absolutely amazing man who saw the world through his own lens, really like individual, and he could really see what wasn't quite right in the world, and he was absolutely right. He didn't always have the solutions, but towards the end of his life, he was done. He didn't have dreams and hopes and aspirations. He was just sort of hanging around, and he withdrew from communication as well. It's almost like his life was done,
Mm.
and there's a perfection to that. So I'm really at peace with it. And as the oldest son, I kind of felt like a similar kind of energy. I was 48 and my father passed. And I thought, well, I've had a pretty awesome life. I've done 7 Ironmen. I've run a swim coaching business in Australia. I've been a great Airbnb host. I've done many things. And I was like, if I passed tomorrow, next week, it's not too bad. I've done some cool stuff. And then I sort of like, I was with that for a few months. And then I was like, well, you know what? Why not do life 2.0? Like, I've got some resources. I've got the entry fee for whatever comes next. I've got from here to here. Why not go to the moon? So I had this fresh burst of vitality. At the same time, I started training again, and all my energy came back, and
Mm.
more
Wow.
so than before. So, and I really find this when I'm around men who are going for it in their lives. When you're being your best self, when you're doing your thing 100% to the best of your capability with humility, there's really no space for jealousy. There's really no space for comparison. There's really no space for trying to prove yourself to someone else, because if there's something I can do better, I want to know. I want to do it better. And if I'm doing something well, great. What else can I do well? And it's an attitude that I really notice amongst men who are going for it. And I'm blessed to have men in my life right now for the first time in my life ever who are on their edge. They're going for it. They're pushing. They're challenging themselves across all the different realms of life, in their training, in their relationships, in their money, their entrepreneurial stuff, their work. And I just love being in that company of men, because whatever you take the piss or whatever, but at the end of the day, because you're 100% on your path and I'm 100% on my path. And if we can inspire each other, great. But there's no space for, I don't know about you, but sometimes if I've ever in the past had like a flat patch where I'm not performing where I want to be performing, then I can look at other people more successful and feel resentment, like just a tiny little bit of resentment. And it's because I know I'm not doing my best. I'm not showing up every day doing all the things I need to do. So to take that and put that back on myself and go, well, the only reason I'm feeling that way about someone else is because I'm not on my A game. So sort it out. Go training. Start it. Begin.
You said your energy came back. How does it compare to when you were 28, 29?
That's a great question. It's really different. I know myself so much better. I know when I need to rest, and I rest earlier before I exhaust myself. So a quick recharge and I'm good to go again. You know, it's like the fast charge on your phone or your Tesla or whatever. You do the quick fast charge and you're good to go again rather
Great
than
way to put
emptying
it.
the battery right down.
The, you talked about surrounding yourself with men on the same path. How did you go about finding these friends to learn from and learn with and do those things?
Well, the first thing was just to actually cut out all the people that weren't at that level.
Mm.
So, you know, I had two friends who were okay, but for various reasons, you know, I wanted to be having those conversations about, right, how are you doing? And you know, how's your fitness? How's your money? How's your relationships? What do you need to do? What are you going to do? And then a month later, you meet up and you say, well, have you done anything? And you can share more. Even accountability isn't even someone saying to you, have you done it? It's more so me saying, hey, I've done it. I'm
Yeah.
accountable to myself. And so, in answer to your question, I cut out the last remaining bits of. It's not that I have a problem with those men, but it's just I don't connect. I don't spend time with them. So then I was on my own, but I'd made space for the other men to arrive into my life, and I was hungry and thirsty for that. And then also, just it takes time to build relationships. People take time to get to know you and trust you, and to be patient through that phase of, you know, when other people, because I'm a, you know, I'm a pirate, I'm an unusual character. People don't know what to make of me the first time, maybe, but then over time they're like, oh, Dunstan's here
I could
again,
see you
and
as a pirate, Pirates of the Caribbean.
arr. I think it links back to being a go-giver that
Mm.
we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
So
There's a friend of mine who's passed. He's a former firefighter. His name is Corbin Hunt, and he always had this saying that I always remember. It's called. It's kind of funny, but said if you want to be a bro, you got to make bro moves. But it applies everywhere, and it's so true. If you want to be a brother, you have to. Or if you want to have brothers, rather, you have to be a brother first. You have to demonstrate the willingness to help, the willingness to lead, the willingness to stand by their side even when they're on a low point in life, etc. There's a lot of ways to be a bro.
I think people underestimate the value they can bring to others. You know, we're always looking for, you know, because it's amazing when if someone gives you an idea that 10 times is your business, that's epic.
Hmm.
But there's also the little things, you know, like if you sit down, do you pour the water for everyone at your table? Why not? You know, like anyone can do that.
Yeah,
Do you?
at work, little small things around the fire station, like sometimes you'll need to put your clothes in the dryer and someone else's clothes have just finished drying. Do you just put them in a big ball on top and leave it there, or do you actually fold it for the person and do a small little act of kindness, pay it forward? Because you really notice it when people do that for you, when all
I
your
bet that
clothes are
makes a big
wrinkled in a
difference if
ball
you've
versus
right.
nicely folded.
I bet if you've done a big shift or whatever and you're, you know, you're sleep deprived, little things like that make a big difference um, to your, how is it, how do you feel a real sense of brotherhood in the firemen?
Yeah, I'm actually very blessed to have, like we were talking about, groups of men through fight gyms and firefighting. I'm kind of involved in a couple different brotherhood type groups that I have lots of great friends. I have lots of guys that I call brothers, and they all kind of came from different backgrounds and walks of life, and it's pretty cool. I'm very fortunate in that regard. Yeah, the brotherhood is real in firefighter. They really take care of themselves and or take care of each other, especially in low points and whatnot. It's pretty cool.
I mean, I guess you say you're lucky, but you said you're fortunate, but you have chosen to put
I've sought
yourself
these people out. Yes, and
in
I've
those
sought these groups.
environments where men hang out, right?
Yeah, I started fighting, and that was kind of my sport from 16 years old on was kickboxing, and so I just kind of grew up in fight gyms, and I ended up going to college, working in corporate America, but it just didn't quite suit me. I guess maybe the environment, the people to a degree, and I had trained with a lot of police officers, firefighters, military guys, and kind of picked all their brains on a possible career switch. And I never heard any fireman ever say anything other than it's not the best job in the world. And they all loved it, But the other guys in the other areas had a lot of bad things to say. So it was just kind of a natural fit. I like that working in teams, units, squads. And I really like helping people, especially at um, an actual moment of need, if that makes sense. I like my stress in life to be very nothing and then very high intensity, and then it goes back down to there's no emergency. And it's a great way to live life. It's very rewarding on multiple levels.
Just being ready, right?
Yeah, and it's similar to the fight gyms is that you're always training. You're always training tactics. You're always staying fit. You're always preparing for the biggest fire of your life or the biggest fight of your life. You know, and there's kind of a saying in fighting that you should train for every fight as if it's going to be the hardest opponent, hardest fight of your life. It's not like basketball or baseball where the coach tells you this is an easy team, guys. We're going to take this week slow, recover because after this is Richmond High, and we all know how good they are. Fighting is not like that. Every single fight is like a climb up a mountain, at least in your head. And then with firefighting, they say you should show up every shift ready for the biggest fire of your career. Because you know, if you go out and drink the night before, skip dinner, you know, whatever, it's a Wednesday, it's a slow shift. People won't be out on the weekend. That might be when you have the oh shit multi-alarm fire where you can't be hungover, you can't be dehydrated. You have to
You're a
be
liability to
100%
to the
focused, and not
team.
just for you, for your teammates,
Mm,
you know, your
mm,
crewmates.
yeah. It's actually really interesting. There's actually an analogy with hosting because I used to go in, when I was less professional, I used to go in a bit of a cycle where I was learning which corners I could cut as a
Mm,
host.
yeah.
And what would happen would it would take a while for the reviews to catch up because basically anytime I get less than a 5-star, it's like, what happened? What went wrong?
Mm,
And I can always pinpoint and diagnose. But you know, what would happen is I'd get to a point, I'd get a bit comfortable, I'd take my eye off the ball, I wouldn't check my cleaner's work. And then nothing would happen for a couple of weeks. And then I'd get a 4-star and maybe another 4-star review. And I'm like, oh shit, I got to get back on my A game. But now I'm in a stage where it's energizing to know that I'm delivering. And the beautiful thing is when I do a check-in, because I show the guests around for 20 minutes and teach them how to use the boat. But when I know in my integrity that everything is spot on, it really, I just really relax and I enjoy that whole connection so much more rather than if I'm trying to compensate and go, oh, I don't want them to notice that sort of little bit there. It's not quite clean, you know? So,
you end up spending more energy doing that than just doing the work initially itself.
because the pride gives me energy as well, the
Hmm.
pride in knowing we've done everything right. And so I guess what you were saying about, you know, I mean, obviously the stakes aren't the same, but, you know, treating every single host like they're VIP and we want to get it absolutely spot on for them. And so then the question comes, where does the energy come from to sustain that over
Hmm.
time? Because you get a lot of people who they start out hosting their first 10 or 20 guests, they do really well, they become super host, and then they get weary, they get exhausted, that you know something gets tired
Hmm.
in their listing, and the energy drops off. So it's really about, we talked about energy earlier, but really about knowing your own energy as a person and how that works, so that you can keep that, you know, consistently keep that level high.
Well, it's being a professional, you know, and I think
Totally.
professionalism is basically
100%.
quality and attention to detail,
100%.
regardless of the field. You know, and
Mm-hmm.
you can always tell, oh, that's a professional brick mason right there. That's a professional fighter. That's a professional Airbnb host. You know,
You can
and you
spot
have
it even if it's something you know nothing about. You can see by
even
the way
yeah,
people move.
yeah, exactly. It's
Mhm.
and yeah, I think it's. I mean, I appreciate professionals in all realms. You know, I think you start to see the commonalities and apply it to your own areas wherever you can. And it's tough because sometimes you'll not want to work out, you'll not want to study, you'll not want to do these things, but that's also being a professional is doing stuff even when you don't want to do it because it's now your job, if that makes sense.
And there's also that one where you know you've done your absolute best in every detail,
Yes,
and then the
there's
person
such a
still isn't
fulfilling
happy.
quality of doing an honest day's work and really killing it on every way, you know. You think that's just a man thing or a woman thing or a human thing? What is that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's definitely energizing to know You know that moment when you're like you're getting ready to go to bed and you're thinking, I just want to do this one more thing. I want to do one more thing because and then you sort of fall asleep because it's like, okay, enough. I'll wake up tomorrow and do it again. You
Yeah.
know, trying to book a flight and making mistakes because I'm half asleep. So it's okay, I'll do that tomorrow.
Sometimes I just look at the bed, collapse face first, and fall asleep because I'm so tired.
But doesn't the quality of sleep? I mean, that's something I noticed when I wasn't training. I didn't sleep as well.
Oh, for sure.
Big
Oh yeah,
difference.
your lifestyle during the waking hours absolutely helps your lifestyle when you're asleep, your sleep hygiene, whatever. If there's, have you ever heard of restless leg syndrome, where some people their legs like twitch at night? I had an old
Okay.
training partner that was like that. He said he had, if he didn't train like really hard, his legs would like kick and twitch, and he couldn't figure out why. But something about like a really hard day's exercise was able to kick that out of your body. Joe
I
Rogan
used to
talks
get.
about this, like there's a certain amount of
Oh,
energy and stuff you have to work out as a man, and if you don't do it, it's like steam builds up and a pot doesn't vent. It's the
nowhere to
parameters
go.
are out of line, you know.
The only thing I have that's similar was during Ironman triathlon. So, the swim's about an hour if you're going for it. The bike's
Yeah,
about 5 hours and the run's 3 hours and something.
I don't even want to stand up for 3 hours.
Standing up's exhausting.
Well, not compared to running for 3 hours.
So one of the tricks you do in triathlon is you modify your cadence so that once your neurons have been firing in a certain tempo for 5 hours, it's very hard to switch that tempo. So you want to keep your cadence reasonably high on the bike, and then you're running on that same tempo.
Interesting.
So imagine you've spent, 8+ hours with your muscles firing at that regular interval. There were a few times where I finished races and I sat down and, you get all the recovery stuff, but my legs were still twitching on that. Like my quads were still firing on the same thing because they hadn't stopped yet. They hadn't figured out we'd finished the race.
Wow. I never thought about that. Maintaining a
It's a
rhythm
weird
across
thing.
the sports or whatever the phases. How do you set your rhythm for that?
Yeah. I was racing on I think I used to race on about 85 RPM, 90. I don't remember exactly. It was something like that on the bike. Because a
Okay.
lot of the time when you're tired, the running form can really suffer. And a lot
Yeah.
of people that are big, I was not small as a runner, but I was a good runner. And a lot of the things that the bigger guys do wrong is they take these big lumbering strides. So it's kind of like lumbering along.
Hmm.
Whereas when I run, it's much more like bop, 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 just keeping the form good, keeping the core, the glutes working. And yeah, so it's a higher tempo with smaller strides, which matches up with what you're doing on the bike. So, but I guess it's something you have to experiment with. But changing the stride length is very
Do
interesting
you
in
sync
running.
that up with your breathing?
Yeah, it's normally like a certain number of strides in, a certain number of strides out.
Yeah.
Again, it's one of those things that kind of happens. It's not really like I'd calculate it and attempt to do it. It's just like the body doing what it needs. And interesting, you mentioned the breathing because I've noticed, it's a very interesting experiment of like I used to be really fucking fast, and
Hmm.
now I'm like, okay, well, how fast can I be now? And I have no expectation. Who knows if I'll ever get beyond where I was in triathlon. It was a
Hmm.
lot of, it was 20+ hours a week of training, and I don't really have that time to train now. The one thing I've noticed see if you can guess what my weak spot is in my fitness.
Your calves, your legs.
It's actually nothing muscular. It's my lungs.
I
So
was
my
joking.
lung
Not your
capacity.
legs. Your lungs, really? Okay. Why you say that?
Yeah. So the difference I notice now is I always used to just be ready to go at the drop of a hat. Like I could jump on the bike and start pushing. Whereas now my lungs hurt. I need to warm my lungs up for a period of like 10, 15, 20 minutes before I can do anything approaching any kind of intensity, even a continuous, steady state, kind of easy, continuous. I have to warm up slowly. So it's an experiment because I don't know, maybe my lungs through 20 years of not being pushed, maybe my lung capacity reduced, and maybe that'll come back over the next few years. But for now, I need to really warm my lungs up, especially in the winter when the air's cold.
That's interesting. What kind of warm ups do you do? Like
The
fast
rowing
inhale, exhale
machines,
through like the nose and stuff?
just going low intensity. Like the rowing machine's fantastic. There's as rowers, we always used to warm up doing the arms only, then doing arms and body, then doing a quarter, half, 3/4 full slide.
Okay.
So that's a really nice one. With the running, there's some walking, some skipping. There's a few drills that I do with the running. But even something like doing a few press ups before starting is just something to get the body going,
Yeah.
rather than just. I also find it helps to separate out the warm up from the work, because obviously when you're timing yourself, what's my pace? If you include a warm up, then it puts pressure on the warm up. So warm up, then do the work as a separate thing.
Okay.
Works for me.
I've never actually trained really as like an endurance athlete. It's always kind of been fighting based. And so the longest round is 5 minutes, you know. Some grappling tournaments will have 10, 15-minute matches, even untimed matches, but
Ooh,
I've never competed
yeah,
in an untimed match. That's almost
that's
like
crazy.
that's
Until
brutal.
someone taps out.
Until someone taps and they'll go like over an hour, 2 hours. It's
Whoa.
insane. Yeah. That's kind of neither here nor there. But I think it's so important for a man to always have a physical hobby, something athletic he's doing to just enjoy the progression of his own body, his own self, if that makes sense. Well, I got your phone.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed
So many
this.
guys, they
Mm,
finish high school at 18. They're like, well, my athletic career is over forever. And they
absolutely.
have no idea how much they could still learn new skills, new hobbies, new sports,
Mm.
build muscles, burn fat, etc. It never stops, really, what you can do. I don't believe so.
Why? It's a choice, isn't it? I mean, I've smashed through several. It's so funny because I know about limiting beliefs. I'm a coach. I've known about this stuff for
Mhm.
ages. But here's a little example. Like, I was tapping along last year with my Airbnb hosting quite happily. Thank you very much. Living a good life. And then a friend helped me to optimize the listing, and I sort of knew it needed doing. And we made loads of tiny changes. We changed the photos and the copy, which were big changes. And I
Yeah.
started to be a lot more proactive with the pricing. So I started to really go for it with the pricing, and all these incremental changes kicked in. And I used to have a belief that January, February, March in the UK were dead. There was no point hosting. Might as well go away and go kite surfing in Bali or Thailand. And I think I created that story because I wanted to go kite surfing to Thailand and Bali. And I got the results to prove I was correct. However, this last February that's just coming to a close, I've done as much this February as I would do in a typical June or July.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
double what it was. I've doubled. And of course, there's more work involved. But as far as how much can be done in terms of hosting in the winter, I always used to think, hey, I'm never going to get midweek bookings from January to March. So I only focused on the weekends. And just the results with that help and with being much more on it in all the little details adding together, it's like I can look back at that person that had those beliefs and I'm like, you know, you're ridiculous. You never tested it. You created the results to suit your beliefs.
Mm.
It's
You know,
amazing how powerful.
that's a really interesting point because just like we just said that you can train your body your whole life and you continue to find ways to be athletically improved. You can do that with your mindset and your belief set too. You know, a lot of people think, well, I'm 25, I got it all figured out, you know, and you can still be figuring out things at 35, 45, 55. The mindset
Why
can be
stop?
improved forever.
Why stop? Totally.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because everyone knows that you can train your physical body and you can eradicate weakness from the physical body.
Hmm.
But and I think it comes right back to that attitude of, you know, one of my mentors once said, a real man is continuously looking to disturb himself.
Mm.
You know, it's like we all like to be successful and feel that we're doing well, there's you know, the comfort zone is always one step away from decline. You know, it's like you're either going forward and growing or and improving and challenging yourself in new ways, physically, mentally, in every aspect, or you're dying a death because everything moves on. Airbnb moves on. When we first started, it was easy. It was so new. You just put any old boat on there with any old photos and it would fill up. And now it's a much more competitive marketplace. So you've got to be really good. You've got to be professional. And it's not that hard, but you've got to want it and you've got to be willing to do the things. So that's what I want to instill in other people, and also to share some of those benefits, like my skills of interaction of this guest wants to have a chat, this one wants to be left alone, just being able to read people
Mm.
really quickly. And even before they come, I can tell by how they communicate. Do they answer straight back? Do they ignore my messages? You know, what kind of a communicator are they?
Perfect. Well,
And I
Dunstan,
match them, meet them.
we're we're starting to run out of time. Let me ask you one thing. If you could give one piece of advice, may have been something we talked about or something new to our listeners, what would that be?
One of my favorite quotes is from a German philosopher called Goethe, and I don't remember it word for word. It's something like, whatever you dream you can do, begin it now. Boldness and courage have a magic about them. So it's really just start, just begin, just get that ship moving, and correct as you go along. The worst thing that might happen is it might not work, and you can learn something and try something else. But if you never tried, you never even know. So yeah, just begin, just get started. You know, whatever, for whoever's watching this, whatever you want to do, whether you want to be an Airbnb host, or you know, you want to be a personal trainer, or you want to build a business, get fit, whatever it is, it's like leap before you look, you know, like the
Hmm.
expression. It's like just show up with your boldness and trust that circumstances will line up to support you in that. You take your step out into the void and the path appears. You step with
Hmm.
a confidence, stepping into thin air, knowing that the ground is going to be there to meet your foot on the next stage of your journey.
One of my favorite quotes is actually leap and the net will appear. I
There we
learned that
go.
from an old teacher, and it's so true. You take the chance and then life will help you along the way. So
Fortune
Dunstan,
favors the fearless.
yes. So Dunstan, where can they find you?
So I have an Instagram, which is Captain of Purpose, all one word. My boat is called Purpose, and I'm the captain. So Captain of Purpose, and the website for the ebook to get involved with the Airbnb hosting is superhostacademy.org.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Dunstan. This is great.